How can we take an interior night scene from this to this? We can do so with a pretty simple trick which many Hollywood cinematographers use, which I like to call overhead ambience. I'll shoot a couple of different setups to show how you can use this technique. For these tests I've rented a red Komodo with Allower nanomorphs, and all the lights I'll be using are sponsored by Nanlite. So what exactly is ambience and why does it help to make these images feel a bit more cinematic? If we start with an ordinary room during the day without any film lights, we can see that the main source of light is coming from the sun and passing through the door and windows. However, light doesn't only travel in perfect straight lines. Whenever a light source comes into contact with a surface, it bounces off it. If it's a light surface like a ceiling or a white polyboard, quite a lot of light will get reflected back. And if it's a dark surface like a grey wall or the black side of a polyboard, a much smaller amount of light will be bounced. To keep a nice level of information outside and avoid blowing out our background to white, I've lowered exposure on the camera using an ND filter. However, this now leaves our interior looking very dark and a bit too underexposed, which means the natural ambience from the sunlight bouncing off the ceiling isn't strong enough. We can fix this by filling in the room with overhead ambience from an artificial film light. Ambience helps make footage look a bit more filmic and less video-y because it allows us to preserve information in the bright parts of the highlights as well as lifting the detail in the dark areas. There are two main ways to add an overhead ambient light source, the easy way and the more tricky way. The easiest way to do this is by taking your light source, putting it on a stand and angling it towards the ceiling. Here I've set up a 500B as well as Nanlite's new Pavo Slim 240C. The stronger the source outside is, the more ambient light you need to add inside to raise and balance the exposure level of the interior, so here I need quite a lot of artificial ambience. The color of the ambient source should be the same as the natural ambience. In this case we have sunlight, which is about 5600 Kelvin, so I've set our light sources to the same value. Bouncing light does three things. It decreases its intensity, it softens the light, and it lifts the overall exposure in the room. Without overhead ambience, the shadows will be deeper and more crushed. With the artificial ambience, there will be more detail in the shadows and the subject will have more of a fill light. If you want to change the direction that the light bounces in, you can do so by rigging a reflective surface. This could be a reflector plate, a polyboard, or even a piece of white card. For example, you could use a top bounce source to create more of a shadowy, low-key look with an edge light. To do this, I rigged a silver polyboard on a C-stand with a poly holder, angled downwards, and placed it behind and above her so that it's more of a backlight. I've then bounced a 500B into it. This both lifts the levels of ambient light indoors and gives a harder edge light to the hair, shoulders and side of the face. The one disadvantage of this bouncing method is that we don't have much control over the spill. In other words, the light won't be concentrated into a single beam of light and will spread around the room. This brings us to method number 2, rigging an overhead source to the ceiling. This technique of rigging top lights to ceilings was famously used by Conrad Hall in movies like The Godfather. Rigging a diffused top light with skirting makes the light source fall directly downward onto a specific area, limiting it from spilling across the entire room. This keeps the walls and background dark, while the character under the source is brighter in a pool of light. This setup is a bit more tricky than just bouncing the light, as it requires either rigging the fixture to a polecat or using a stand with a boom pole. Here I've rigged a polecat by extending it across the room and then locking it. To this I've added a super clamp to secure the Nanlite Pavoslim 240C and its ballast onto the pole. I've added the softbox to the front of it with a diffusion layer to soften it. Then, to control the spill and prevent the light from hitting the back wall too much, I've created a bit of a DIY makeshift skirting using black material, which channels the light into falling directly downward. One reason that many DPs choose to use this technique is because it allows them to point the camera anywhere around the set other than the ceiling without seeing the source of the light. This way, cinematographers can fully light the entire space in a set, rather than composing a specific shot, getting an actor on a certain mark and lighting only that spot. Actors therefore have more scope to change their blocking during a scene, and directors have leeway to easily change or add shots once they have started shooting. If you look at behind the scenes photos of Hollywood studio sets inside sound stages, you'll almost always see these diffuse top lights rigged over the set to create artificial ambience. Rigging lights high up in a soundstage also creates more distance between the light sources and the set, which means the light falls off in intensity, making it a bit softer. Not only does ambient top lighting feel a bit more real, but for large long-form productions it also means these fixtures can be pre-rigged and then left there, out of sight for the remainder of the shoot. So every time a scene needs to be shot on that set, the lights can be switched on, remotely dimmed and set to a preset color temperature with a DMX board, without needing to spend time setting up and positioning the lights each shoot day. This is a big time saver and provides consistent illumination, which is easily repeatable and controllable. Now that we know what overhead ambience is, let's break down 2 examples of how we can use it to make our footage a bit more cinematic. The lights that I'll be using in this video have been kindly provided by Nanlite, today's sponsor. The main fixture I'll be using as a top light is their newly released Pavoslim 240C, a lightweight RGB 2x2 LED, which is a perfect choice for rigging overhead. With its softbox, it's a quick to set up, beautiful, gentle source, with a bright output, custom lighting effects modes, and the ability to get your light to any color you want. Whether I'm working by myself or with a gaffer on a shoot, I like to be able to dim and control my fixtures remotely. This way you can stand at the camera's monitor and balance the levels and color of your fixtures by eye. To do this, I sync my lights to the Nanlite app, where you can turn them off and on, dim them, change color temperature, or even add them to a lighting diagram. If you'd like to check out more of Nanlite's products, I've linked their site in the description. For the first scene, I'm going to do a night interior setup to show how top lights can be rigged out of sight to add a gentle ambient fill to a couple of rooms, creating pockets of light and shadow in different areas. First, I'll rig 2 top lights, one in the middle of each room. I've used the 240C for the final larger room and a 120C for the interleading passage. I've rigged these to a polecat and run the cabling along the pole and out of sight. But you can also power them with batteries if you want to shoot completely 360 degrees cable free. In this first room, I've used another 60C Pavoslim, which I've bounced into the ceiling. I've set these lights to 5600 Kelvin, while the camera is set to 4200 Kelvin. This means our ambience will be a little bit cool. This nighttime ambience lifts the level of detail in the shadow so it doesn't get too crushed to complete black, and allows us enough light to expose the scene at 800 ISO at t2.4 on the lens. To create a bit of a warm, cool contrast and to give some backlight in our final landing position, I've added a practical bulb to the last room. This is a Nanlite 10C LED, which I can run with a power bank. I've dimmed it and set it to a warm color temperature. Now it's looking a bit better, but the windows feel flat and lack depth, so I've set up a 500B fixture outside the glass door and windows and warmed it up with a sodium vapor gel, creating some warm textured light. So if I do a handheld walkthrough of the shot, it'll look something like this. Note that we can move the camera through the entire space without seeing any film lights. If we start with just the practical, it will look like this. Then this is with the warm window light added. Notice how the shadows are mostly crushed to black. Then we add the final ingredient, our overhead ambience, and there we go. We can now see some light detail in the shadows while still keeping a dark look and without blowing out any highlights. So that's an example of using ambience for a night scene. Now how about a day scene? The first thing I'm going to do here is only look at the brightest part of the frame and set my exposure so that it retains some color and information without blowing out. If you want a super high contrast look, something like this might already start to look quite good. We've got a nice natural key coming through the window on the far side. However, since I want the shot to have a brighter high key look, I'm going to add some ambience to fill in our character so it's less of a silhouette. To do this, I've taken a 500B and bounced it into the ceiling, positioning and angling the source so that it fills in the side of the face with shadow, which is closer to the camera. As we've mentioned, it also lifts the exposure of the darkest parts of the frame, unveiling a bit more detail. Then I'm going to rig the 240C as a backlight behind the character from above by rigging it to the polecat. This will create a subtle rim or edge light and provides just a little more separation to the shot. Here you can see how it creates a highlight on the edge of the hair, side of the face and shoulder. So there we go. This is where we started without any lights. Then we can turn on our ambient bounce, which lifts the space with a soft light that gets rid of the dark shadows on the face. And then we add the backlight to create a slight edge on the hair. Hope you enjoyed this video. Special thank you to all the patrons who get these videos early and free of ads, as well as all the loyal subscribers. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.